Okay, everybody here? Good. Proving your quality to reclaim market share. And on a light-hearted note, I was on Saturday trying to figure out how I could encapsulate media quality in perhaps one slide. And I'm not going to pretend that the next slide is the best example of satire. But nevertheless, it was topical because it was Guy Fawkes and relevant as well because of the whole Brexit thing. So apologies that this, I'd like to say this was sort of dog-eared by design. My dog actually then walked over the newspaper and created that crumpled effect. But anyway, I'll let you read through that. I think that, you know, of all of the different things that we do so well in British media, satire surely has to be one of them. And of course, the other thing actually to take from this is that in many countries, if you are lampooning the establishment in this way, you know, you could be arrested. So thank God for a free press. So, automated audience trading overlooks media quality. So we've moved from selling media to selling audiences, and there's absolutely no question that that efficiency has been felt both on the buy side and the sell side. As Steve said, advertisers certainly are feeling the pain of a lack of transparency in this process, and I'll show you some figures that would underline that. But actually, you know, from the publisher side, how much within that programmatic space is there something built into the algorithm that isn't just touching on the audience, but actually on the quality of the media source itself. So something that's saying, hey, this is a premium publisher, and this premium publisher tends to have this kind of brand lift versus others. Is it possible to do? Why not? We have to look at it. Obviously, we'll have to, you know, there'd have to be some funding behind it, but potentially, I would say it could be possible. But that bit is missing right now. And if you look at the IAB PwC, the annual digital ad spend study, no great surprise that programmatic is now 60% of digital ad spend. Don't think any of us were surprised by that. It's due to grow to 80 to 90% by 2019. What I thought was particularly surprising was that that growth has really been made up by the top right-hand quadrant there. So that would be the predominantly the private marketplaces. So that's grown 75% year on year at the expense of the open exchanges. Now, I think when you talk about programmatic, to most people, they still think that programmatic means the open real-time bidding exchanges, and clearly that's not the case. So what does it mean? I think advertisers are shying away, clearly, from buying blind in real-time bidding environments. That goes back to the lack of transparency we talked about. And I think as publishers, you know, where you're not selling direct, then you're obviously trying to meet demand through private marketplaces, and that does create some context for advertisers because they know that, you know, where they're advertising in terms of the publisher. But in terms of extending beyond that to the actual content on the page and the context of that in order to serve very relevant ads, that kind of hyper-targeting, some are doing, but most are not really at that stage yet. So I think there is a targeting disconnect really between advertisers and publishers. Now going back to what Steve said, I'm actually making even more, 75-25. But look, it's a small piece of the pie that everybody is fighting for outside of Facebook and Google. And you know, that's tough. So how do you try to regain market share? So I think you need to really be convincing buyers of your media quality. So the first point I would say is that context matters. Now, context obviously can take many forms. So there could be premium publisher context. Now, we recently did a study, the halo effect. This was using, actually, this was DCN. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Digital Content Next. It's a consortium or a trade body of premium publishers in the US. So we started with the hypothesis, trying to sort of show, you know, do premium publishers actually drive greater advertising effectiveness? I hasten to add that DCN, by the way, did not underwrite this study. This was just something that we did internally in order to try to prove this case. And lo and behold, some great figures came out from this. So display ads on premium sites, 67% higher brand lift than on non-premium sites. Premium publishers are 3 times more effective in driving mid-funnel metrics. So that's consideration, but also intent to recommend. So a pretty key part of the funnel, really, for brand advertisers. And then on top of that, probably more of a secondary rather than a primary reason, but nevertheless important, is that effectiveness helped with higher viewability rates and lower invalid traffic rates for the premium publishers as well. So the key takeaways really, yes, there is brand lift for premium publishers. There is a halo effect. It comes from that trusted environment of being on in a premium site, a premium publisher, the context of that, and then, as I said, the mid-funnel impact as well. So, this is really something that publishers can be going out with, whether it's as, let's say, the AOP, whether it's a similar consortium of premium publishers, or whether it's an individual publisher. I do think that there is more really rich data out there that you could be leveraging to push your message to the buyers. Of course, there's also a stage further, which is the editorial context as well. I thought this was really interesting. This is public domain information, by the way, from The Guardian. I found this on Newsworks. But they've went into this in a bit more detail as well. They've said, so we found that when visitors to The Guardian website view brands alongside relevant editorial, they are 10% more likely to pick up information, 20% more likely to feel positive about the advertiser, but crucially, 23% more likely to think that ad is relevant to them. So very powerful data there. I think we would all agree that context, plays a big part. It's been done forever in the offline world. Why wouldn't it work very well online? But I think it's good to have that underpinned with some data. So, hyper-target ads based on the content on the page. Two ways of doing this, but both actually are all dependent on reading the text on the page. So the first is real-time page targeting. So as a publisher, how can I serve more relevant ads in real time? The second has nothing to do with real time. It's not programmatic. It's about tracking users' content consumption over time, and based on the pages that they're reading, translating those interests back in as segment IDs, back into the data management platform. Now, let me give you an example of this. Apologies if anyone's seen me put up this slide before. I am a bit of a golf fan. If any of you actually watched that, he had a 12-foot putt for $11.5 million, so it was $1 million a foot. It's mind-blowing. So, we're in the wrong game, clearly. So this would be an example. Now, I haven't put a lot of text at the bottom of this, so I don't want to give you the impression that comStore is reading what is on the page there. I mean, Jeremy was saying earlier there's artificial intelligence to do that, which no doubt will be on our radar. So imagine a whole load of text. Now, comStore does this in a pretty unique way. So we look at text on the page, we look at the character sequencing on the page, the unique sort of pattern recognition technology that we use, and it sounds a little bit Twilight Zone, but it really works. So we use that character sequencing in conjunction with keywords. We bring the two together for a very, very accurate, reliable, scalable way of being able to determine what a page is about. So the two examples I've given you, let's have a look at the real-time page targeting, and I've kept it really simple. So let's say as a publisher you have Nike as an advertiser, and you know that at that moment in time I'm on the page and I'm reading this article about golf, but also about Rory McIlroy, and you could get much, much more detailed. You know it's brand safe as well, so you would serve the Nike ad. But using the audience interest example, You may not, for example, have something quite as off-pat as that, and you may not have Nike. So you're wondering, okay, haven't got any sports brand, what do I do? Well, if you've been tracking my behavior over time and you notice, let's say I'm user 123 in the data management platform, and you see that I've been looking at a lot of weekend break articles or travel articles lately, and lo and behold, you have EasyJet as an advertiser, you would serve the EasyJet ad. So 2 examples, one where you'd be using in that millisecond in time programmatically what's on the page, or you've got somebody coming back to your site and you've measured their interests over time and you're serving based on previous content consumption habits. And of course, it's not just about the positive side of this, it's also about the negative targeting, because you've got to be custodians really of your advertisers' reputations here. So this is an example, actually I did pull this as a real example. And for those of you who've got peanut allergies or kids who've got peanut allergies, do be careful, because this is a tragic story of somebody who actually died kissing her boyfriend who'd just eaten peanuts. And she dies. So, of course, if you make peanut butter, the last thing you would want to do is advertise next to that. Would be a disaster. We certainly believe that targeting contextually has moved on now from the sort of more first-generation way of doing it through keywords to actually move it beyond that to combine categories. So what is that page about from, as I mentioned earlier, from crawling the text on the page and combining that with keywords to get a far more accurate picture and therefore be able to serve ads in a much more relevant way and charge higher CPMs. So I'll just give you an example of how that would work. So let's say you've got a sports brand and they're looking to target marathon runners. They've just brought out new marathon running shoes. And they initially think, brilliant, Runner's World, it's got to be relevant for running, we'll advertise there. But actually, that article is about gaining muscle and losing fat. It's actually not really the sort of article that would attract marathon runners. So probably not a good place to serve an ad. And now the flip side of this, if you just look at keywords, you would think, fantastic, I've got marathon in the title, I've got it down here in the subtitle, and no doubt if we saw the rest of the text, it would be peppered through there as well. But actually, as you see, this is a canine interest story about a dog winning 7th place in the town's half marathon. So got nothing to do with really marathon running at all or attracting them. So really what you want is the combination of the two. So in this one, you've got Runner's World, you know it's an article about training for the marathon. It's also got the marathon keywords all the way through there as well. So it's bringing the two together to get a much richer targeting experience. Here's a case study that we've done with Hearst. So Hearst do a lot of customized sponsorship packages. This is one for the Titans of Mavericks. It's a big wave surfing competition over on the west coast of America. And amazingly, they were actually doing manual content discovery. And I don't know if anyone's actually done that, but it is an absolutely tedious, laborious thing to do, and you feel like you get nowhere. Trying to dig out surfing-related content manually, you can imagine. So they came to us and said, how can you help? So essentially, we automated the process. We combined both the category targeting, so we took surfing as a category from crawling the page, but we mixed that as well with keywords like Mavericks, because that's the name of the competition, Half Moon Bay, where it's taking place. And we did things as well on exclusions. We didn't want to confuse it with the Dallas Mavericks basketball. We wanted to make sure there was no unsafe content and so on. And we did it across both real-time page targeting, so what was on the page at that millisecond in time, but also on audience interest targeting. So who had already looked at surfing content and maybe came back a week later, you'd recognize them because they had the segment ID in the data management platform to target. And we had some fantastic results. So beforehand, only 200,000 impressions were manually discovered. We increased that 10 times by automating the process, which in itself would have been great. But what really, I think, made this for them was the fact that we doubled the CPM, or they doubled the CPMs. So clearly they were able to get far, far more effective advertising for clients through this, as well as freeing up a lot of time, right, for people that could actually focus on other things. Just before I move on to the next bit, I would also say that there is another form of kind of activation you can do, which is in terms of demographics. Age and gender is something that we are going to be launching in the next month or two via the major DMPs. I just wanted to mention that. So the second part, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you've probably seen, verified impressions done to death at these things. But I do want to point out that, this is still a major problem. It's not going away. And if you really want to build trust with advertisers and agencies, you've still got to keep on top of this. So could it have been seen by human eyes in a brand-safe environment? And I think the really key thing with this is that the fraudsters have got far, far more sophisticated. And I use that term in terms of, as well, the MRC definition of sophisticated, which means that you're only going to track what is now 80% of the invalid traffic problem through your incredibly smart data analysts who are building these really complex algorithms to detect and filter it. It's no longer enough just to use the ad tag to pick out events on the general level. And, programmatic, understandably, magnifies the problem. So if we look at desktop viewability rates, this is based on comStore data. For programmatic, it's much lower than direct sold inventory, and in programmatic, it's 50% higher on invalid traffic than it would be through direct sold. And the fraudsters are following the money. So the high value ads attract the most invalid traffic. Video is 50% higher, and in fact, in programmatic, video invalid traffic is 2.5 times higher. So it is something to really keep track of. You do need to use a vendor that's going to be able to detect and filter at a very sophisticated level on invalid traffic. So the third part is validate your audiences, because of course, you're not just looking at validating the delivery of a campaign, you're also looking to target an audience ultimately. And that is getting harder and harder. So if you are, for example, trying to target males aged 18 to 49, you've got about a 1 in 2 chance. But actually, at the other end here, if you're looking at females 35 to 54, you've got not much better than a 1 in 4 chance of hitting that demographic group. So I would say, where you can, look to get some independent third-party validator to come in and look at your data and give it a stamp of approval. So, for example, we've done some work with Northern and Shell in validating their demographic segments. And fairly straightforward process where you take an index of 100, anything over 100 is an over-representation. So you get an index, let's say, of 500 on a demographic group, and it means you're 5 times more likely to hit that target group than if you just hit the internet at random. And they got some terrific results from doing just that. But it could also be behaviors as well. So we worked with Xaxis in validating their behavioral segments at the turn of the year. I think there's a press release on their website about that. And also there are other nuggets of information, cognographic information that you could find out as well from segments that you may not otherwise have known. So you might take an auto-intender segment and find, weirdly that they're also into football. They've got a high over-indexing for that as well. So you're never quite sure, but there could be nuggets of information in there too. So validating with a trusted source is really key. And finally, this problem is not going to go away either. So ad blocking is on the rise, and you really need to be on top of it. So I guess, do you know what is the prevalence of ad blocking on your sites? Do you know as well what are the demographics and behaviors of these ad blockers? And perhaps most importantly, what's the financial impact? Now, comStore is actually just getting into this. We're in beta testing right now with our ad blocking service with some major publishers both in the US and the UK. So we'll probably be launching something at the tail end of the year. But one of the things that we found is that we really strongly believe that the industry is underrepresenting the problem. We think it's higher than most people would think. Some of the things that we found out, not surprisingly, it is the younger age group, so 18 to 34 is the key group, particularly males. Now in Germany, it's 1 in 2 of that age group, 49%. In the UK, it was 29%. For females, it was 22% in the UK. So, you know, these are big numbers and growing. And of course, the problem then is because, you know, for advertisers, they're looking to target people with money, and lo and behold, it's people with high income. So that's not great either. But it was really around this. So we picked 10 at random, 10 large publishers, not the largest 10, but just 10 across sectors, just to see, you know, roughly what would be the spread of the impact on a monthly basis. And we found that this ranged up to $4 million per month in lost advertising revenue. So this is really quite significant. And of the various sectors that we chose, we found that adult sites were, in fact, the most prevalent. I guess, clearly, there are some things you just can't interrupt. Anyway, moving on. In summary, so, you know, advertisers want more quality, and, you know, you can give it to them. You have that quality. Verified impressions, crucial, but only part of the story. So validate your audience segments. Serve ads in a more advanced way against relevant content, and maybe commission some research that you can go out with, and you can really go much more on the attack as to why agencies should be spending more money with you as opposed to Facebook and Google. Because I think then that discussion that you have moves, if we go back to Rory again, you know, there's your ad slot, it's 80% viewable, you know it's contextually relevant, you know it's brand safe, and so, you know, you're going to be selling that for a £20 CPM, not £5. And because I'm on that site and I love golf and I'm reading that and you're serving me a relevant ad, guess what? I'm not going to block it either. And that's it. Thank you.